are joining us from the national network. The idea for today's session is really just to have an opportunity to exchange ideas with NSF and to hear from the community, as well as sharing thoughts with a group of NSF Includes program officers. So I will start just by introducing myself. Zoom helps with some of that, but my name is Tori Smith. I am one of two co-leads for the NSF Includes implementation team. And I was quickly scanning, because I said her name, she appeared, to see if the other co-lead is here. So Rebecca, you are officially on the spot with impeccable timing, just to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's so nice to be with you all here. I had to catch the last couple of minutes of the student panel. I apologize. That was really lovely. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rebecca Haka. I am the other co-lead together with Tori Smith of the NSF Includes implementation team. I am a program officer in the geosciences.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I do see others joining us now that the main session has ended. I was about a minute late coming myself because it was hard to pull away, but we are officially kicking off here with introductions, and maybe I will just go in the order of squares as I see them on my Zoom screen so that the other program officers could just quickly introduce themselves so that you'll know who it is that you're talking with today, and then we'll go ahead and get started. I don't think there's so many that that'll be a problem in terms of timing. So Kurt, that makes you first.
Hi, Kurt Thurman. I'm an expert in EHR, Division of Research and Learning, and I serve with Tori and Rebecca on the management team.
And Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Letty. I'm a permanent program officer at NSF. I've been with NSF Includes since it began. I am the program officer overseeing the new Tapped into STEM Alliance. It's the alliance about persons with disabilities. And I run the Alliances for Graduate Education in the Professoriate Program. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Faye.
Good afternoon. I am Faye Cobb-Payton. I am a rotator and have been with the NSF Includes implementation team from the beginning, literally, of my rotation at NSF. I am the PO for the CASHI Alliance, Includes Alliance, and am in the SIZE Directorate where I work with smart and connected health in the age of AI and data science and a number of other programs. Thank you.
All right, Manya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am, I've been with NSF Includes for several years, and I work in our Division for Research on Learning in the Education Directorate. I work primarily with K-12 and informal education. I'm also the program lead for the Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program and the Managing Program Officer for STEM Ops and the STEM Push Alliances. Thanks.
All right, Jolene.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jolene Jesse, also with NSF Includes almost since the inception. And I am the program officer for the Aspire Alliance.
And Nigamoth, you're up next.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nigamoth Sridhar. I'm a program officer in the Division of Graduate Education at NSF in the Education Directorate. I've been with the NSF Includes implementation team for about a year now, and I've been helping with the new ACE Alliance. And in addition to NSF Includes, I also have program responsibilities in cybersecurity education, particularly the Cyber Core Scholarship for Service program and the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Education program.
So the implementation team members on the call today are getting early information because we haven't yet announced that Michelle Rogers is going to be joining our team. But Michelle, would you introduce yourself next, please?
Surely. Hopefully you can hear me well. Michelle Rogers, new to the Includes implementation team. I'm with CNS in the SIZE Directorate.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have actually one of our NSF Includes design team members with us. He is participating in lieu of some of his implementation team colleagues who couldn't be here today. But Don, would you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm subbing for Jesus Soriano and Christine Grant, who unfortunately can't be with us, but I am from the engineering directorate and have an avid and really passionate interest in trying to be able to broaden participation in engineering, which let's just say could use the help, period.
Thank you, Don. And Don also co-leads our NSF Includes design team, along with Diana Elder, who's the division director for the Division of Human Resource Development in EHR. That is all of the team members that I see. Is anyone else on the line from the NSF Includes implementation or design teams? All right. Hearing none and seeing none. So with that, we again want to yield the balance of the time in today's session to hear from the network. If there are ideas that you would like to share with the group of program officers, if there are questions that you have, and particularly questions about connections perhaps to other broadening participation or other programs at NSF more broadly, you'll see that the cross-section of program officers and leaders represented on today's call do represent different directorates, because NSF Includes is a foundation-wide initiative, different programs, and so there's opportunity to receive information, not just about NSF Includes, but also in looking at some of the questions and ideas that have been posed in the chat about possible connections or opportunities that are presented by other NSF programs. So I will stop there and just open the floor to questions, comments. Who would like to kick us off? I think we've interacted with the network enough to know that at large, it is not a shy group. So I'll assume this is just the wheels are turning for thinking of questions or comments.
I can kick it off. I'm Mike Silovich. I'm a co-PI on the Engineering Plus Cohort 3 Alliance. And as the other Cohort 3 groups are grappling, you know, the question I would ask the program officers is, what were the major hurdles that the new cohorts had to overcome in the first year? You know, there's a lot of gap between the proposal on paper and the program on the ground. And I'm just curious as to what the experience of the program officers has been in terms of advice that you can give to us newcomers in terms of how to make that transition as seamless as possible.
I'll concur with Kathy in the chat that that is a great question, and open the floor to any program officer who might want to answer.
Okay, I'll be bold. So I was the managing program officer for First Two. I see some First Tours on the call. Hi, everyone. And also I was working with my other program officers to design the reverse site visits for the Cohort 1 alliances. And here's a metaphor I discovered that I think is apropos. There was an exhibit of artistic tapestries in St. Louis that I went to that were fantastic. But there was one particular one that was great in that it was double framed. And so you could see of course, the art, and so the amazing patterns on the front, but you could also see all of the connections on the back. And so all of the very complex ties and ways that everything in the front were connected. And my strong advice is that the new alliances have to attend to both all the time. It's super important that you deliver. It's super important that you actually make progress in the ways that you have identified to forward broadening participation at scale in the ways you identify. You, of course, are the awardees, and so your vision there is paramount. So do those things. But you need to simultaneously pay attention to the back of the tapestry to make sure that you are making those connections in ways that not only make possible your early gains, but always being mindful of how to strengthen those ties and make sure that those are secure as you are expanding and scaling in real time. So that's the first insight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. Other perspectives to add in terms of advice for new alliances based on lessons learned in the first year from the program officer perspective?
So this is Faye. So Kurt and I had the pleasure of working together a lot, including on reverse site visits. And I think one of the main things that we learned that we would pass on to you is that if there is a question, if there is a concern, it is best to get that question out to community, because largely that is another question that another alliance is likely to have. And so learning from each other and getting the questions out and answered sooner rather than later, because we don't want those to be, I guess, blind spots doing, touch points and regular interactions with NSF as well as with your colleagues. So ask questions.
Thanks, Faye. Manya.
Okay, thanks, Tori. I was just jotting a couple of notes. So I just have a few comments, and thank you again for the question. One, I would say is around strategic, your strategic plan. And I think that's really important. It takes a while to develop, and certainly will be, kind of an iterative document and process. But I do think that kind of some early thinking around the strategic plan, and in fact, we have some language in the cooperative agreements about how soon, that first draft should come. But I think that alliances often find that maybe what they originally intended or submitted has evolved in the time since submission. And so I would just really encourage new alliances to start thinking about their strategic plan. And if you need to bring in a professional to help with that, then that may be something that you may want to consider. I also would mention about the whole kind of reason why we do this. We are looking to increase broadening participation in STEM, in various different communities, groups, individuals, et.cetera. And I would really encourage you to think about how you're doing that, and what indicators will you look at, and how will you know that you are making a difference for your particular target groups? Because I will guarantee you, having been with NSF Includes for 3 years now, every reverse site visit panel at some point brings this up to one or more alliances. Like, okay, how do you know you're making a difference? How are you moving the needle? So I would encourage you to think about that sooner rather than later. And then the last thing I would say, I saw that Allison put in the chat, and I think it should be elevated, which is, your colleagues, your other cohort members, your managing program officer, the hub are all resources. And I think that you should feel open to approach any of them, because we are all deeply invested in this work and want to see you succeed. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manya. So Mark, you'll have the last word here, because I see other good questions being typed into the chat.
I will be brief. I think we heard two things in the last 2 days that were very important to guide you as you're starting. One came from one of the original alliances, and they said, take your time, move slow. It follows on Manya's statement about strategic planning. Don't rush this. We heard a similar thing from Ivory Tolson today when he said, when you go alone, you go fast. And when you go with a group of people, you have greater success. When you have collaborations, partnerships. And so I think you're hearing that from multiple people that yes, reach out, value your NSF Includes national network and the hub and your program officers and your community as a resource to help you succeed.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? From the program officer's standpoint, is it possible to get examples of strategic plans that you feel are good models that we could look at and help guide the creation of that type of document?
I think just to quickly answer, I can draw on what Manya just mentioned. And while NSF can't release those to you, I think your colleagues may be more than willing to do so. I believe it came up in a conversation earlier in the convening that there is at least one that has actually been offered in the online library of the includes.org National Networks online community. And so that one we know of for sure is there. But as the Alliance meets together as a collective, that is certainly a question you could pose to your now peer alliances, because many have expressed willingness to share.
Great, thank you.
No problem. All right, let's see. The next question that I see is, and it's moving with other comments, is do NSF program officers heavily use includes measures, and how? And how does NSF use such resources in planning and funding? I have an answer, but there are many people here. So let me pause and allow others who may want to respond. Maybe no one else wants to respond. Okay, well,
All right, Tori.
Oh, go ahead, Jolene.
No, I said go for it, Tori.
Oh, I know that I'll have an answer to every question, so I want to make sure we all have an opportunity to respond. But I would just say, and now I've lost the question in the chat. Here we are. Okay, so as it relates to the measures, one of the ways that program officers use it is in looking at annual reports. So when annual reports are submitted by the alliances, program officers have a check sheet of sorts to ensure that we are looking for the same things and making sure that projects demonstrate the kinds of things that will speak to NSF Includes progress as an initiative. So that's one way. The shared measures framework that the Coordination Hub developed in order to showcase or show you the tour, at least in this first phase of unveiling the shared measures site, that same framework is built into guidance that alliances actually in all projects, not just alliances, but all funded projects receive as guidance for developing annual reports. And then that also becomes part of the checklist that program officers use so that we can ensure that projects are communicating the kinds of impacts that will speak to progress. So I think that was my first response. And then you mentioned in terms of planning, that the data certainly help in terms of one, identifying gaps and informing funding priorities perhaps for the future when you look at it from a planning perspective, but there are a number of ways in which the data help to address stakeholders, whether that be at the congressional level within NSF. So there are a variety of ways that we use the data in planning and in general accountability. Would others add anything there before we move to the next question? I got a nod from Kurt that I think we're, yours was the only expression I saw, so I figured I'd acknowledge it, thanks. All right, so let's see. How have Includes Alliances changed your perspectives and practice as program officers? Is there a new normal we're striving for? I'm sorry, Jolene, I'm actually hearing your voice responding to this one in terms of striving for new normal, given not only the scale, but the aspiration for overall systems change. So while I didn't intentionally put Jolene on the spot, anyone please feel free to respond. Jolene, what I actually heard was building the plane while flying it. That used to come up so often in the beginning. That's why your name
No,
popped in
I
my
have
mind.
to say, I think being involved in NSF Includes has changed my perspective enormously on what is possible, and what, you know, this whole notion of fast and slow is really Ivory, that was just really enormously helpful this morning to think about, because when Include started, there was this, we've got to change things fast, and things have to get, happen really fast. And we were actually trying to get this program up and running. And I think what I've learned over time, and as I have been involved with alliances and deeper with NSF Includes, is that it doesn't happen fast. And Michael, your first question was really great, because what you put in that proposal is unlikely to be exactly what happens as you go along, because it's an evolution and process all the time. And I think one of the things that I've learned, especially from my alliance, who actually answered this question, is that there is always a really good process out there that you can find for whatever issue you run up against. So one of the things that Aspire did really well was to think about leadership and communication really early on. And I've always said that leadership and communication is the most important of the 5 pillars, and the one that people spend the least amount of time actually doing in their proposal, or thinking about in their proposal. It is usually the least developed of it. And part of that is because it's a process that starts once your alliance starts. What does shared leadership look like? What does communication look like across the network? Is something that can only happen as you are developing the network. And that was something that I learned really clearly from Aspire and watching other alliances both struggle and succeed with building that shared leadership and what that looks like. So I think it's an enormous lesson that NSF has learned about fast and slow. It's not going to happen fast, but as we work slowly, we work better together.
Thanks, Jolene. Now I'm going to put Manya on the spot because she has a thinking face and I feel like there's something she wants to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Manya.
Well, I did have some ideas. It's going to give others a chance to jump in there. Actually, can you restate the question for me, Tori?
Sure. It was, how have Includes alliances changed your perspectives and perhaps also practices as program officers? Is there a new normal we're striving for, given not only the scale, but the aspiration for overall systems change?
Yeah, so I had a couple of notes here, and I was thinking, so definitely for the systems and change bit. And I think that's a place that we don't always think about, especially in some of our programs where they may be a system, but they're smaller systems. And when you think about NSF Includes, you know, our work that's being funded is just significant, you know, and that I think for me has been really great to see. It's nice to see good work where you're bringing together partners and other efforts that have been done in a similar space to do something fantastic as a group and as a whole. And so it's just really nice to see that. I think the focus on collaborative infrastructure has also been a perspective that I think has really grown for me, especially as it relates to the 5 design elements, because it provides a real kind of guideline and some specific areas to look at as we think about collaborative infrastructure. So I don't know, I think for me, the systems approach, the collaborative infrastructure, and I would say the partnerships would be the 3. I have BP on my little notepad. I wanted to make sure I heard the question correctly. But I do have BP on here, and I think it's just the scale at which NSF Includes has the potential to impact what we are hoping to achieve in terms of challenges in these different communities. So I added another one in addition to partnerships. Yeah.
Don, I see your physical hand raised. Is that?
I figured I'd give it a shot. So I think from a high level perspective, something that we've learned is that we really need to take greater risk to be able to actually allow us as an agency to be able to do things that, frankly, we may not have a clear path to being able to get a specific outcome. And so my encouragement would be to be able to have you not just keep your program officers aware of what's going on, but to really bring them in as, in essence, aids in thinking through opportunities that may come up that might, may not necessarily be in the purview of Includes per se, but relate to Includes and could really support you. And of course, I think you've got great opportunity for being able to mutually support each other in reinforced activities that are being done. And so take advantage of those opportunities across the different alliances, the different activities associated with Includes, to be able to actually work on these problems outside of your specific area that you're addressing.
And did I hear someone else who was going to speak before we move to other questions?
Don and others have done fantastically. The one thing I suppose I can say, having been lucky to be part of NSF Includes for several years, is even though we realized that there were going to be time constants and scale constants, we of course were new, and for quite a while we were still getting a footing about what NSF Includes was. And so I think there was a time at which there was, even though of course we aspire, as Manya rightly says, to broadening participation, in truth, our own diversity, equity, and inclusion approaches were not particularly diverse or equitable or inclusive, just because it was a limited opportunity. So I think we finally have our own scale and our own sustainability and our own expansion in a way to be better about that, to be a fuller ecosystem and to be wise to the breadth and depth of not only what we can do, but what are some really core problems that we are only learning more about in the living. And thankfully, we now have this great, more mature ecosystem. And as Don was mentioning, great synergies with other NSF and other programs to start tackling some of these really vexing core issues.
Definitely. And I would say that embedded within the question is, I think, part of what has progressed in thinking over time, because NSF Includes, of course, started with 2-year, I think up to $300,000 design and development launch pilots, which were kind of test beds and exploration projects. And now we're talking about systems change, which was actually part of the question. So that in and of itself speaks to the progression of how, initially the focus was on how can collaborative infrastructure be effectively leveraged, and that remains the question, but now it's shifting to the kinds of impacts that it can have at systems levels, and being able to demonstrate that NSF Includes has had a unique contribution not just studying the collaborative infrastructure measures in isolation, but sort of the collaborative infrastructure measures as they inform the BP measures, as Manya mentioned, with that being the overarching goal.
So Tori, this is Faye. I think also what I heard in the question was, how was this forming us as POs, as program officers? And remember that each of us are in different directorates. And in a lot of ways, what we are learning and have learned within Includes also is informing how we do look at what we do perhaps in our own directorates. And so it's an internal learning as well, which Includes has been informing all of the directorates, given its reach and its scope and scale at the agency.
That's an excellent point. Thanks, Faye. All right, perhaps I have not done a great job keeping up with the chat, but don't feel like you have to type in the chat. We'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. If you do have a question, let me just see if there are others. Carl, I see that you mentioned reaching out to the coordination hub, and I do want to make sure, because of the hub's role in sort of managing the national network, if ever we say national network, the coordination hub is certainly front and center in that. The national network online community, I think those from the hub on the call will say it took us a while to stop calling that the coordination hub's website, but we do think of those as one and the same. It technically is the coordination hub's website, but more broadly, it's the national network online community that the hub manages. So absolutely, the hub is the resource that then puts the information out for the national network via that online community that includes network.org. But thank you for raising that point. All right, let's see. Oh, and Sherry's giving a literary nod in the chat. All right, other questions from the community, and perhaps what I'll do is cue program officers, if there are no questions in that direction, if you have any questions to ask of the community that has joined us for the roundtable. So I don't hear any questions from our participants. Let's go Manya.
So my question is, how can we help? I'm curious to know, what are some ways that you all see that we can better or best support you in the work that you do or doing or will be doing for some of you?
I see wheels turning visually. Howard.
Well, I might as well just plunge in here. And before I do, I can't thank all of you, particularly at NSF, enough for what you're doing. I've also been involved from Includes from the beginning, from the grantee community. And I know that in some ways, NSF is sort of backed into Includes. I know that at an earlier time, Includes was sort of layered on to your day jobs. And I know that developing this has been both a group effort, it's been very intense, and gosh, it takes all of us to do this, but it's incredibly ambitious, incredibly exciting, and we really appreciate your efforts on behalf of the whole community. So all of you coming together in a session like this, but also to help all of us out in the community is quite an undertaking, and it's really a delight to see. My question is, many of us in the alliances, this is going to sound very myopic, and I guess in a sense it is, but many of us in the alliances recognize that to build the infrastructure, to change systems, frequently takes more than 5 years. You hardly get going. And particularly if those that are working, for instance, to try to change numbers of graduates, which is oftentimes a 4-year or even 5-year endeavor. A 5-year award hardly can scratch that system. Is NSF thinking further as to what an alliance might mean? And I'm not just talking about a renewal. I know that sometimes center awards in NSF are of longer duration, and there are different ways of considering whether that center continues to exist. And I'm wondering what NSF might be thinking along those lines.
It's ironic that that's the question for which I was unable to unmute, but I got there now. Are there others that would like to at least start off that response? And maybe this could be a place where your experiences, as Howard mentioned, there are centers that may have different approaches to funding and lengths of grant period durations, but we've mentioned that NSF Includes is a foundation-wide initiative and you all represent different directorates. Does anyone have perspectives on this more generally based on your experiences in your directorates? Howard, I think mine is not the only unmute button that's stuck on this one. Let's see. So Don, let's go to you. It doesn't sound like any others want to kick this one off.
Okay, so have we given any thought as to how we might be able to sustain it? So the answer is yes. So I think that's fair. What are the specifics? Can't say. Obviously, we can't talk about what the future opportunities are. But let me just offer this, and that is sustaining in the activities associated with NSF Includes are going to be a team effort, and it's going to take NSF with the community to be able to do this. And so please think through not just how you're going to sustain your project and create those plans, but think to a larger view of how can the entire ecosystem work together to be able to sustain this. And please try and just do a thought experiment for us of how might you be able to do that with a little money, a lot of money, and no money, because we need solutions that aren't going to require NSF's investment forever at the same levels, but we may need to be able to think through how we would be able to actually support the full ecosystem. And we obviously do want to be able to have the ability to be able to work on new exciting projects when they emerge and be able to grasp, basically jump onto new ideas because they emerge each point in time. Likewise, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater in terms of the older activities that the activities we've supported for a long time. We want to keep them engaged. And so we are looking to you as well for, let's just put it as recommendations that we might be able to actually be able to keep the glue of the community together. And again, I encourage you to be able to think through what could you do that you're not doing now for no funding? What could you do for some funding? And what might that idea actually take advantage of? And then, if we were investing large amounts, what would that be? And don't take it as a selfish perspective, if you will. Take it from what could we do as a collective? And we'd love to be able to hear thoughts around that for each of the alliances, for the alliances in toto, as well as, remember, NSF has what we commonly refer to as a broadening participation activity, which includes all of the directorates have efforts that relate to trying to be able to do improvements around broadening participation. And there are possibly connections we don't see that you see from the outside that we would be able to take advantage of.
Don, if I may, as you know, the Alliance directors of the first two cohorts have begun working together at some focus to attempt to live up to that challenge. We're going to obviously welcome cohort 3 directors into our cabal, and it's not just the directors, it's the leadership. I don't think that any of us view our funding as an entitlement. And I don't think that any of us view that the funding we presently have should continue, absent us proving that we're contributing to widespread system change. But I really appreciate, and I'm sure that my fellow colleagues in other alliances appreciate both the challenge and the opportunity that you're giving us, because I also think that we all feel a responsibility that you've given us. As alliances, it's a little different form, and it's a demonstration of what we might be able to do together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and let me just double down on, this is not a standard NSF type of award, right? Where we give the award and we say, okay, give us good things. This is one where I really want to stress we're entering into a partnership with you all. And hopefully you see it that way, is that we're your partners in this activity.
Absolutely.
I just have a couple of codas. One is, Howard, I certainly resonate, that's the wrong verb. I understand the challenge in terms of having targets in terms of broadening participation and improving educational outcomes, and the time scale of the awards are not at the same scale as the changes you aspire toward. And of course, it's very difficult, especially on a systemic basis. On one hand, of course, that's the case for the vast majority of educational research. And so in all of our divisions within EHR, be it research on learning, be it the HRD programs, which themselves explicitly work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion, for the entirety of these programs in this system, there's been this mismatch. And so if there's a comfort, maybe, there are plenty of exemplars of long-standing programs at NSF who have overcome this particular barrier. And so maybe learning from those parallel systems might be of use. That being said, what Don ended with is certainly apropos, that what we aspire toward for NSF Includes is, of course, national scale and national influence. And that is a difference from most of the EHR portfolio, where it's more point by point. And so hopefully some of the similarities and reaching out to broader EHR communities can be of help in terms of beyond the award expansion, scale, and sustainability, but also look for ways that those exemplars aren't of help, and let us know of those gaps, and we can work with you to help make sure we can all move forward.
So I'll just add one last thing, Tori, because I have another meeting and I need to drop, but I'd say, Howard, one of the things that has happened, of course, within SIDES has been the broadening participation that have been, there's a very different approach from the current Includes model. And so you may want to take a look at the broadening participation in computing alliances, but keep in mind, Includes is, and I often have to say this to my colleagues, Includes is based on 5 key elements with the assumption that there will be, and there must be, a backbone to support the activities associated with that. And so there are some nuanced but major differences. So in your quest to look for perhaps what exemplars may and may not be of learning points, I just point within
Faye, hopefully it's not just me, but you were going out on this, so sorry if I'm cutting you off, but the end was trailing. But I think we got the essence of what you were saying, and thank you for offering the BPC model as one that alliances might look to, just to get some ideas. I'd issued the disclaimer that questions may be coming the other way, and this may be a good place for that, though I was definitely taught as a child not to answer a question with a question. But Howard, to your question, I'm now going to pose a question and do exactly the opposite of what I was taught to do. So I wondered, from the perspective of a proposer, and Faye just alluded to the 5 elements of collaborative infrastructure. So when you see that potential for expansion, sustainability, and scale, what does that look like in the mind of the proposer? I think you've gotten some insight into kind of what NSF is thinking or has done in other models. But I think it would be interesting to know, when you read potential for expansion, sustainability, and scale in a $10 million, but only 5-year project, and understanding what may or may not be possible in those 5 years. So certainly we know what you put in the proposal, but just in terms of general thinking, what do you think when you see that in a solicitation?
Well, Tori, I have a very quick answer because I think it's a nice one, and then I want to invite other alliances to respond too. As perhaps you don't know, one of the areas of Aspire that we're very proud of is a network called iChange, and they've been talking in other sections of this meeting. There are 53 universities in iChange right now, which is a nice sized network. Now, if we're really trying to change the system, 53 is nothing. I mean, what would it look like if we had 200 universities in that network? What would it look like if we could scale to sort of a Strive type model where you have different levels across the country? Are we conceptually powerful enough and organizationally wise in order to do that? And to me, NSF couldn't and shouldn't support the whole thing, but might be a partner in trying to scale to that level. What do the rest of you think? We've got other alliances here who have a few years under their belts. What are you all thinking? Gosh, they're just as shy as your NSF program officers. There must be something about this.
I saw a few videos pop up, and so I think I was going to say that must be the precursor to a response.
Yeah, so Allison from STEM Push. So Tori, to answer your question, I think what we thought, given the constraints, especially the time constraint of 5 years, that we're not going to be able to scale and change an entire system in perpetuity. What we look at that as, and what we hope to do, is to have a proof of concept model, right? That shows that this can be done, just like it's a research project. And so to be able to have the data and results to be able to say, this is a better way, right? And then to move on from there to get adoption on a bigger scale.
I might just add on to those colleagues. This is Robin Parent from Aspire, and I wasn't a proposer, but as we sit in starting our 4th year as an alliance, I think what we're looking at is, at least for Aspire, is this very large alliance. We have 3 major change teams, and it's almost like systems within the systems. And we talked a little bit about the very first day in our town hall about what we wish we had known. And we also talked about it in our cohort 1 and cohort 2 alliances about how do we understand the system. And I think from some of what we're thinking about now about sustainability and scale is twofold. What can we do that is sustainable and scalable within the initiatives that we have going within our alliances and within our projects? Is there potential then to align, to connect, to collaborate, to create something that is much more of a larger systems? And how do we get those connections off the ground? Some of them, like Don was talking about, may not cost anything. Some might cost a little bit. Some of them might be much grander and almost look like outward growths of additional alliances. How can we begin to see those so that we can develop that much larger system and understanding about what includes is as a broadening participation systems change organization?
Thanks, Robin. I think it's helpful for NSF to hear that or those perspectives. Kathy?
So Kathy Mader, part of iGen, and one of the things that kind of connects with what actually all of the other alliances have said is, you know, iGen right now has 3 disciplinary societies as part of our alliance, and within those societies, they each have somewhere between 30 and 60 academic partners, and we're quite excited, and we planned for the fact that there would be similar academic partnerships. So a single institution or academics institution might have partnerships with all 3 of our societies. And so we're really excited when that happens. But then I interact with the Spire and hear about their iChange institutions and say, wow, what if our 180 departments were actually part of those iChange units, right? But where's that we didn't plan for, right? How to deliberately build that connection and help to facilitate interactions across that part of the network. When we talk to the different alliances about a whole host, the C's group, the STEM push, there are so many pieces we're learning because we're hanging out as alliances and talking to one another where there's potential for interaction. Working with different national labs. Some folks are in the undergraduate arena where we're in the graduate arena. Another place where we could actually, instead of individually going to talk to folks or individual alliances going, finding ways to work together. And that, the scale of that would be phenomenally powerful, but we don't have the bandwidth to do that, right? And so there are a whole host of potential networking opportunities just with people who are already involved in the existing network. And that would be a great thing to find a way that we pull that in, because that wasn't planned for. I think the scale of that type of networking was not planned for by our team.
Again, very helpful perspective. I think it helps to, you know, as a parent, I know that what you say is not always what is received. And so I think it's helpful sometimes to get an idea of what's been received in the message as opposed to what was intended, because sometimes they don't align, and that's just the reality. So thank you for those responses. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat. I don't see other questions. Oh, Allison solved that for us. So it says, because the alliances don't have that 30,000 foot view of the network, how can we work more closely with you? And so I think, well, actually, I told you I would do that. I have an answer to almost every question. Let me pause. Do others want to address Allison's question? I know there are ideas, we've discussed them.
Could encourage the folks from the coordination hub to also participate in responding to some of these questions as well.
Definitely so. And in that, Don has alluded to one answer, but are there coordination hub members, well, yes, members of the leadership team that might want to respond? Not that we're putting you on the spot.
Yes, we are.
And again, the question is just, given the bigger picture view of the network as a whole, how might you suggest that individual projects, or in this case, the question was posed by an alliance PI, but how might alliances or individual projects work more closely with NSF Includes? So hearing no direct responses, I will just say, again, Don alluded to one in the opportunities that there are for interacting with the coordination hub in order to get information essentially to NSF Includes, because as I mentioned at the onset, a lot of the metrics that come out of includesnetwork.org are those that we look to provide information to stakeholders, similar to the information that's provided in annual reports. And so that part is important. And Don also alluded earlier to how important it is for NSF to learn from the community. So as the challenge was issued to develop ideas and to share them, I think that's another way that we can work more closely together is in platforms like this, even though we may not have the Zoom space, but there's always an open email door, always a door through the quarterly meetings with program officers, but it's in the sharing of information, I think an exchange of ideas, which was similar to the goal for today's session, that NSF can learn from the community in terms of ideas and desired directions, like the kinds of things it was. Manya put in the chat a little bit earlier how learning from the community was really the impetus behind planning grants and the kinds of funding opportunities that may need to emerge to address areas of need. And so all of that comes from communication. So I think to the extent that there can be more open lines of communication, even that would be a huge help, especially as it relates to determining direction. Uh-oh, you moved on me, Allison. There you are. Determining direction for NSF Includes. I have talked right up until our ending time, and I know another session is starting, but let me stop there just in case anyone had any closing comments that they wanted to make that we have to now do very quickly.
So if I could just augment what you just said, Tori, from the standpoint of the big picture from NSF's purview, if you will, obviously this convening is clearly an attempt to be able to help provide folks with a sense of what the full community is working on. And so hopefully you'll take things away from this, but I'm just going to refocus back on my comment earlier that this is, you heard the phrase building the plane, as we fly it, so on and so forth. Ideas are coming forward since the day we started Includes, and we've tried to be able to build on these. We've tried to be able to look at it from a real good design approach where you obviously learn from feedback and be able to change course correction when necessary. So please work together. Reach out to folks that you've heard things from that might actually have continuity points for you, and please share them with NSF. And now I'm going to make a plug for, we released 2 reports with respect to NSF Includes, and a lot of material came from you all, from the community being able to share with us the types of lessons you're all learning. And not all of them have to lead to success. Failures are valuable. In fact, from an engineering perspective, we would rather have the failure happen on a pilot than actually on a working product. So we really want to be able to hear back from you all the types of things that we could then put into our further reports to be able to give you a greater perspective of what the network writ large is actually capable of producing, and hopefully bridge further continuity points for you all. Thanks, Tor.
Thanks, Don. So we will allow Don to have had the last word as we are 2 minutes over time, but we do invite you to your personalized agenda so that you have the link to the next session, which has begun, and then the closing session, which will start at 5:05. Thank you all for your participation. We look forward to the continued exchange with the network.